All right, so when you think about countries talking to each other, what pops into your head? Probably an embassy, right? You know, that big official building with a flag out front. But here's the thought. What happens when a country needs to talk to a massive organization like, say, the UN?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's easy to picture the U.S. ambassador talking to the French president. That's a one-on-one deal. But how does the U.S., or any country for that matter, talk to something like the United Nations or the EU? I mean, you can't just have a meeting with the UN. So what's the deal?
Well, the answer is something called a permanent mission. And I know it might not sound super exciting, but trust me, these places are incredibly powerful, and they're the key to understanding how our world really works.
So what exactly is a permanent mission? Think of it like this. It's basically an embassy, but for an international organization. The key word here, and it's a big one, is organization. They're not there to talk to a single president or prime minister. They're there to represent their country inside the institution itself. And that one little tweak, it changes absolutely everything.
Okay, so this gets us to the absolute core difference here. It all boils down to two words you hear a lot in diplomacy: bilateral and multilateral. Let's break them down.
This chart lays it out perfectly. You've got two completely different worlds. An embassy is bilateral. That's just a fancy term for between two sides. Think of it as a one-to-one conversation. But a permanent mission, that's multilateral. It's one country talking to everybody else all at the same time inside this big organization. It's a massive one-to-many group chat.
And because of that, their day-to-day jobs are worlds apart. An embassy is all about cooperation, working with the host country on things like trade deals or cultural events. It's about building a good relationship. But a permanent mission? Its world is constant negotiation. It's all about hashing things out, building alliances, debating the wording of resolutions, and trying to get hundreds of countries to agree on something. It's a totally different ballgame.
Okay, so we get the what, but what about the who? Who are the actual people working inside these missions? Let's peel back the curtain a bit.
Right at the top, you've got the big boss, the permanent representative. You can think of them as an ambassador, but instead of being the ambassador to a country, they're the ambassador to the organization. They're the head negotiator. Backing them up is a deputy and a whole team of specialized diplomats. These are the policy officers who become total nerds on super specific topics, from nuclear non-proliferation to fishing rights.
And let me tell you, their days are absolutely jam-packed. This is not about fancy dinners and cocktail parties. We're talking about the real nitty-gritty of diplomacy. They're in meetings, negotiating the exact wording of a resolution, literally arguing over commas. They're on the phone, coordinating votes with their allies, trying to build coalitions to get their way. And all the while, they're sending constant updates back to their capital. It is nonstop.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this look like in practice? Let's check out two of the biggest hubs for this kind of diplomacy: the UN in New York and the EU in Brussels. First, let's head to New York City, to the big one, the United Nations. This is where you'll find a permanent mission from pretty much every country on Earth, all crammed together to tackle the world's biggest problems.
The diplomats working at a UN mission have to be jacks of all trades. Their portfolio is just massive. One morning, they could be in the General Assembly debating a huge resolution. Then, right after lunch, they're in a tiny committee room discussing international security. And before the day is out, they're working on humanitarian aid policy. Seriously, they have to be experts on almost everything.
All right, now let's jump across the pond to Brussels, where we find a totally different flavor of multilateral diplomacy. We're talking about the missions to the European Union, which, by the way, are usually called permanent representations. The missions here are plugged right into the EU's lawmaking machine. I mean, it's almost surgical. See, the UN is mostly about setting global norms and big picture ideas, but the EU, it's a lawmaking body. So these diplomats are in these super technical working groups, hammering out regulations on, well, everything, from data privacy rules that affect your phone to standards for the food you eat. For countries in the EU, this is where their national interests get baked into European law that impacts hundreds of millions of people. It's a huge deal.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the how. But here's the most important question, right? Why does any of this matter to you? What's the actual real-world impact of all this quiet, behind-the-scenes stuff?
This is a really key point, so lean in for a second. We tend to think that all the big rules are made in national capitals, right? Like in Washington, D.C., or London, or Beijing. But honestly, in our crazy, interconnected world, that's really only half the story.
The truth is, a huge chunk of the rules that govern our world, the actual fine print, isn't decided in a parliament.
It's negotiated line by line, comma by comma, inside these very missions. And the sheer scope of what they cover is, well, it's breathtaking. This isn't just about abstract international law. Think about this. Ever wonder why you can get on a plane in one country and land safely in another, no matter the airline? It's because diplomats in these missions negotiated the tiny technical safety standards that every country agrees to follow. That one thing affects millions of us every single day, and it was decided in a committee room, not a capital. Same goes for trade rules, for global security, for development goals. The list goes on and on. There's a saying that really nails what this work is all about. Multilateral diplomacy is a marathon of inches, not a sprint of miles. And that's exactly it. It's slow, patient, sometimes painstaking work. Progress isn't about giant leaps, it's about tiny victories, convincing someone to change a single word or to add one new clause. But over time, all those inches add up to become major international agreements.
So, after all that, if there's just one thing you remember from this, what should it be? It's this right here. Super simple. An embassy is country to country. That's bilateral diplomacy. A permanent mission is country to organization. That's multilateral diplomacy. If you get that, you get the whole game. These missions are truly the engines of our international system. They're the place where the big, fuzzy idea of global cooperation gets turned into actual concrete rules. One conversation, and yeah, one comma at a time. And that leaves us with one last pretty big thought. If these missions are quietly writing the rulebook for our entire world, far away from the TV cameras and public debate, then who exactly is holding them accountable? Who's watching the watchers? It's a really important question to think about.